Look at South Korea from the outside, and you're staring straight at the future. It's a hyper-connected society that feels a solid decade ahead of the rest of us. Flawless public transit, towering glass skylines, massive homegrown tech giants building the screens in our hands, the memory chips running the internet, and the cars parked in our driveways. Then there's the cultural export machine dictating global trends in music and film. By almost every traditional metric, South Korea is a masterpiece. It played the brutal game of globalization, and it won. So why do the people actually living inside this success story seem so terrified of it? Beneath the high-tech gloss is a quiet, grinding crisis. This is one of the wealthiest, most advanced nations on Earth, yet it holds a deeply unsettling record, the lowest birth rate in human history. Ask young Koreans why, and they won't point to some mysterious cultural shift. They'll describe an environment where just reaching a normal, middle-class baseline has become so fiercely competitive and so punishingly expensive that millions of them have simply walked away. South Korea won the economic race, but somehow it made normal life feel unwinnable. This isn't a story about a failing economy. It's about what happens when an economic miracle works exactly as designed and then turns on the people who built it. To understand why the country feels so paralyzed today, you have to look at the staggering speed of how it got here. In the 1950s, the nation was flattened by war, no natural resources, a population trapped in devastating poverty. Yet, over the following decades, the government engineered one of the most aggressive economic ascents ever recorded. The state knew it couldn't get rich selling goods to its own impoverished citizens. The only way out was to build things and sell them to the rest of the world. Extreme export-led growth. Instead of waiting for small businesses to grow organically, the government picked winners. It funneled massive amounts of cheap credit, tax breaks, and political cover to a handful of family-owned companies. It gave them a simple directive: build ships, pour steel, manufacture cars, and eventually dominate consumer electronics. These corporate empires became known as the Chaebol, and you already know their names: Samsung, Hyundai, LG, SK. The strategy was ruthless, centralized, and brilliant. The Chaebol became global titans, swallowing market share and dragging the entire nation out of poverty by sheer force of will. A country of farmers transformed into a country of engineers and executives in a single generation. National wealth exploded. By every definition, it was a miracle. But an economic model is essentially just a giant machine. And the problem with South Korea's machine is that as it kept accelerating, the gears started grinding against the people inside it. The economic miracle didn't disappear, it just got incredibly narrow. The exact same system that made the country rich now acts as a bottleneck that ordinary people can no longer squeeze through. Early on, the giant Chaebol pulled a growing workforce right up the ladder with them. Today, their dominance actually suffocates the domestic economy. These conglomerates generate a staggering percentage of the country's GDP. But because they are highly automated global titans, they employ a surprisingly tiny fraction of the workforce. Only about 10 to 12% of South Korean workers hold jobs at top-tier large firms or in the public sector. That leaves nearly 90% of the workforce relying on small and medium-sized businesses. This creates the first invisible wall in the economy. The job market is fractured straight down the middle. Imagine it as a giant walled fortress. Get a job inside at a top-tier Chaebol and you win the golden ticket. High salary, excellent benefits, social prestige, and real job security. But if you're stuck on the outside, you step into a completely different Korea. Small businesses are often trapped as low-margin suppliers to those very same Chaebol giants. Because the massive companies hold all the pricing power, they constantly squeeze these suppliers to keep their own export prices down. The small firms simply can't hold on to enough cash to pay their workers elite wages. The gap between these two worlds isn't a slope, it's a sheer cliff. A worker at a small firm might make half the salary of someone doing the exact same job inside the fortress, and crossing the wall mid-career almost never happens. Because the penalty for missing out is so severe, the competition for a golden ticket is ferocious, and it starts in childhood. Society correctly understands that the only reliable key to a fortress job is a degree from a top-tier university. That realization has triggered an educational arms race unlike anything else on Earth. Kids are put on a hyper-competitive treadmill the moment they can hold a pencil. After regular school, millions of students head straight to private cram academies, called Hagwons, studying deep into the night. Families pour jaw-dropping amounts of their income into private tutoring, desperately trying to buy their children a slight statistical edge. But let's say you survive it. You study until midnight for years, you ace the brutal national exams, you beat out hundreds of applicants to land a job at a major conglomerate. You did everything right, then you hit the final brick wall, housing. South Korea's economic boom was intensely centralized. The wealth, the elite universities, and the corporate headquarters are overwhelmingly concentrated in the greater Seoul area. Today, roughly half the country's entire population is crammed into this single geographic bottleneck. When half a country competes for space in the exact same spot, real estate prices detach from reality. Picture a young couple staring at apartment listings. They quickly realize that even with elite jobs, buying a decent family home in Seoul without massive financial help from their parents isn't just hard, it's mathematically paralyzing. This creates a deeply deceptive economy. On a global spreadsheet, South Korea looks incredibly wealthy, exporting billions in high-value goods. But back home, domestic demand is surprisingly weak. Ordinary people don't feel rich. They feel tapped out. They're quietly drowning in household debt just to put a roof over their heads, while huge chunks of whatever income is left drain into private education. Every spare dollar goes toward securing a basic foothold in society. The national economy is a giant engine powering a brilliant spotlight pointed at the rest of the world, while the room it sits inside slowly goes dark. Combine a fractured job market, an endless education arms race, extreme urban density and crushing housing costs, and the psychology of a generation starts to break. Young Koreans aren't just tired, they are structurally exhausted. A country can get rich faster than its people can breathe. For the older generations who rebuilt the country, economic growth was an escalator. If you stepped onto it and worked hard, it carried you up and out of poverty. But for the younger generation, that escalator has turned into a treadmill. You have to run at an absolute sprint, burning every ounce of energy you have just to stay in the exact same place. Adulthood here is treated as a strict package deal. You're expected to secure a prestigious job, buy an expensive apartment, get married, and have children in exactly that order. If you stumble at step 1, you delay step 2. If step 2 proves impossible, you eventually give up on step 3. This is the real driver of the demographic collapse. Western headlines like to frame Korea's plummeting birth rate as some sudden, mysterious loss of family values. It isn't. Young Koreans didn't magically forget how to love. They are simply doing the math. Having a child means entering them into the exact same brutal, hyper-competitive gladiator arena you barely survived yourself. It means taking on the crushing financial burden of Hagwons. It means signing up for decades of debt to afford a larger apartment in an unforgivingly expensive city. When the cost of stability feels entirely out of reach, opting out isn't a rebellion, it's a defense mechanism. This environment gave birth to the give-up generation, locally known as the NPO generation. These are young people surrendering dating, marriage, children, homeownership, and sometimes even personal hope, simply because the entry fee to a stable life is too high. From the outside, South Korea looks like a finished success story. From the inside, it feels like a society where success just got narrower, more expensive, and infinitely harder to inherit. It's easy for observers in North America or Europe to watch a video like this and brush it off as an extreme outlier, a slightly dystopian anomaly born out of a unique regional history. But that's a dangerous misreading. South Korea isn't an anomaly, it's a preview. Everything happening in Seoul right now is just an accelerated, highly concentrated version of the exact same forces tearing at the social fabric of almost every advanced economy in the world. Look closely at the mechanics. Wealth and power are concentrating in a handful of giant tech firms that generate trillions in market value but employ a fraction of the workforce. Precarious contract work is on the rise, fracturing the labor market and hollowing out the middle class across the West. Young people are increasingly locked out of homeownership as real estate in major economic hubs transforms into an exclusive luxury asset. Middle-class families are going broke paying for the childcare and education required just to keep their kids from falling behind. And birth rates are declining everywhere, driven largely by financial anxiety and structural burnout. Does any of that sound uniquely Korean, or does it sound exactly like London, Toronto, New York, San Francisco, and Sydney? South Korea just got there first because they industrialized so rapidly and concentrated their society so densely. They hit the absolute limits of modern capitalism before the rest of us. They are the canary in the coal mine, showing us exactly what happens when national success depends on relentless competition, and wealth concentrates so heavily at the top that the middle simply caves in. The South Korean government is terrified. Over the last 2 decades, they've spent hundreds of billions of dollars desperately trying to fix the birth rate. They hand out cash bonuses for having babies. They launch endless PR campaigns. But the needle hasn't moved because you can't fix a structural earthquake with a financial band-aid. The entire economic model is built on concentration, speed, and extreme competition. You can't solve a housing crisis, a labor bottleneck, and an education arms race by tossing a young couple a small monthly stipend and hoping for the best. South Korea remains an awe-inspiring nation. The export engine that pulled a devastated country out of the ashes is a marvel of human ingenuity. The skyscrapers, the semiconductors, the global cultural dominance, they are absolute proof that the system worked. But an economy is supposed to serve the society that builds it. When a growth model becomes so rigid and fiercely competitive that ordinary people have to sacrifice their own futures just to maintain it, it stops being a miracle. It becomes a trap. South Korea isn't failing because the economic miracle was a lie. It's struggling because the miracle worked flawlessly and then failed to evolve for the people living inside it. They built a towering, magnificent fortress of prosperity to win the future. They just forgot to leave enough room for their own children to live inside.